Time to check out a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 5. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1996. Narrator, Eric Ost. Chapter 26. I woke up to the sound of heavy rain buffeting the windows of my room. It was 7:30, and the morning sun had left our galaxy for good. My legs sought Sugar Baby under the blankets, where she always cowered during a storm. And then I remembered she wasn't with me. Alas, neither was Ross, my pal Denuit. With all the rain and wind outside, where could he have gone? What had drawn him from the secure warmth of my bed to the harsh elements outdoors? What urgent mission beckoned him? An assignation? Mine was not to ask. People in Ross's line of work, like taxi drivers, were busiest during bad weather. He left a note on the nightstand. See you later. Verbose he was not. And then I finally remembered he was going to wrangle a car for one of his jobs. But so early? I called for room service, but was told that the house staff had been reduced to a skeleton crew due to the storm. I'd have to fend for myself regarding food. I showered and dressed. Downstairs, the desk clerk advised me to catch the last evacuation bus out of town, which was scheduled to leave at noon. I thanked him for telling me, but I had no intentions of leaving the island that way, on a cattle car. I donned a plastic poncho, compliments of the house, and took one of their bikes to Camille's. But the cafe was closed. Boarded up, in fact. The few other people who were out walking in the storm were wearing sunglasses. Despite a sky dark with rain, I ended up at Fausto's Market, where I bought some fruit and crackers and yogurt, which is about all that was left on the shelves by that time. The bottled water was completely sold out. I had a vague feeling of panic about that until I realized all I'd have to do, if necessary, was stand out in the rain with my mouth open. I'd only have to watch for wind-borne geckos and palmetto bugs. I was munching my makeshift breakfast under the portico outside the market when I saw Laura Hope on her way in. She was almost completely concealed by her poncho. I said, "Nice weather for ducks." Her reply was an irritated smirk. I said, "How's your friend Nancy Drew?" "We're not friends," she snapped. "You're friendly enough to give her a ride on your motor scooter last night." "You're mistaken," said Laura. I told her what I'd seen the previous night at La Diosa del Mar, that she'd met Attorney Drew. They had talked briefly, then left the place together. "So what?" said Laura. "What are you meeting about?" "Mind your own business," she said. "You ought to leave this place now, for your own good, before it's too late." "Everyone's telling me that." "You have no idea what these hurricanes are like," she said. "If you stay, anything could happen to you." She headed into the market as if to escape from me, then changed her mind and came back out. She scurried around the building to the side parking lot. Moments later, a big imported sedan, champagne-colored, appeared and maneuvered gracefully onto Fleming Street, then turned onto Symington Street and headed west toward the marina. I got on my bike and tried to follow the car, but they had the advantage of internal combustion over my Slavic metabolism, and they got away. I rode past the marina anyway, which is where they seemed to be heading, but the office for Blue Water Tours was dark and locked up tight, which wasn't a surprise. Who'd go out on a boat in that weather? Then I biked past the Gulf Coast Playhouse. All was deserted there, too. The heavy construction equipment stood dormant in the gray wetness, and the temperamental outbursts and blustery indignations of Etzelsham and Ken Kimball had left no echoes. Pedaling my way in the wind and rain, I once again thanked my Czech forebears for the genetic hand they dealt me regarding legs. Despite the harsh weather that morning in Key West, I found myself enjoying my waterlogged excursion. I made a brief stop at the police station. My soggy appearance must have belied my enjoyment of the elements, because Lieutenant Sanfuentes exclaimed, "What the hell happened to you?" "I'm surrendering to a power greater than myself." Sanfuentes shook his head. You're going to be surrendering to pneumonia if you don't watch out. How can you get pneumonia in Key West? Because your body loses heat no matter how warm you think it is. And once your temperature drops, the bacteria finds a welcome house. And that's how. He punctuated his explanation with a sharp nod of his head. Sounds great, I said, except all I had to read was Etzel's sham, and matching wits and muscles with a raging hurricane was preferable to that. Once again, I set out into the storm, but in the brief time I'd been inside the police station, the wind had picked up drastically, so much so that staying vertical on the bike was impossible. I dismounted and walked it along the sidewalk. The traffic was moving slowly, but more steadily. Then a Titanic white convertible pulled up to the curb beside me. The passenger's window lowered itself electrically. From inside the car, I heard Cozy Dinette yell, "Austin!" I straddled my bike and went to the open window. Like other folks who were out, Cozy had her sunglasses on, despite the obvious unnecessity for them. She said, "Are you crazy riding around in this rain?" "I kind of like it," I said. "Man against the elements." "Why haven't you left the island yet?" "Look who's talking," I said. "Yeah, but I am crazy and I live here. Besides, I've got to keep the troops entertained when the lights go out." "How are you going to do that?" "What, you think I can't sing without a microphone?" She brayed one of her noisy laughs to prove her vocal strength. "What are you doing now?" "Quack, quack," I replied. "Forget it," she said. "Get in." "Where are we going?" I said. "Just get in," screeched Cozy. "Drinks are 3 for 1 at the toolbox." "What about the bike?" "Throw it in the trunk," she said. "It's open." I did as she told me, but then the trunk lid wouldn't close. I went around to her window and told her it was going to fill up with water. "Do you have eyes?" said Cozy. "Will you just get in the damn car?" I did, and as we pulled back into traffic, she explained, "There's plenty of holes in the bottom of that trunk to let the water drain out. This is a great car for kidnapping people if you want to keep them alive." And off we went, crawling along through the wind and rain for a hurricane happy hour at the toolbox. Cozy pulled her car into an empty space in front of Lee Diosa del Mar. With the toolbox upstairs, traffic had pretty much thinned out at that end of town. Gusts of wind buffeted the car, making it sway and bounce on its springs. Rain pelted heavily against the windshield. "Here you go," said Cozy. She left the motor running. "Aren't you coming in?" She hesitated, then said, "I've got one small thing to take care of. I'll be back in a bit." I got out and closed the door, but before I could get the bike out of the trunk, Cozy drove off in the heavy rain. I called after her, but instead of slowing down, she accelerated, taking full advantage of the open street ahead of her. Inside the hotel lobby, the fireplace was going. The desk clerk looked bored, probably because all the guests had fled the island, at least those with any sense. The fire beckoned to me, and I realized I was feeling a slight chill from my wet clothes. I went and stood in front of it to warm myself. The scene was pretty ridiculous. A blazing fire in Key West? I heard the sound of hurricane merriment echoing down the staircase from the toolbox. After 5 minutes, Cozy still hadn't shown up, so I went up to celebrate hurricane happy hour on my own. I hoped to see Ross tending bar, but it was the other guy, the lesser god. Seated around the bar was a group of hurricane drinkers. Among them, Etzel Sham, Ken Kimball, and the Countess Radalinska, all in a row. Etzel motioned me to sit near them at the bar. The Countess and Ken greeted me coolly. Etzel was more cordial. "What's keeping you here?" he said. "I was sure you'd be off the island by now." "It's not love, is it?" "Is that what's keeping you here?" I said. At that moment, the bartender placed a frosty martini in front of me. "First one's on the house," he said. "After that, they're 2 for 1. Honestly, I would have preferred a cup of herbal tea to ward off the chill I was feeling, but I never refuse a free drink, especially a martini. I thanked him then took a big gulp. I turned back to Edsel to continue our joustus interruptus, but was thwarted by the Countess, who was suddenly standing up and fastening the buttons of her raincoat. She pleaded with Ken Kimball to leave immediately. Ken explained to Ed that he and the Countess really did have to leave the island right away. It was almost too late, and they had been delayed far too long. The roads might even be closed. Ed apologized as though he had been the cause of their delay, yet something had obviously been important enough that they all met for a drink before the other two evacuated the island. And then finally, the Countess and Ken Kimball left the bar and went downstairs. Edsel turned to me and said, "Now where were we? You and Ken have certainly kissed and made up after your fight the other night outside the playhouse." "Oh," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand, "we always bicker. That's the strength of our friendship. It's the proof of honesty and trust for another person when you can speak your mind without holding back." Perhaps he was telling the truth. After all, Nicole and I had exactly that kind of a relationship. He added, "You saw Ken just now. Did he look like someone who was angry with me?" "No." "But why did they delay this departure? Was it just to bid adieu to you?" "That sounds like love to me," Edsel grumbled. "It was strictly business. Between friends." "Sure," he said. "Don't you engage in commerce with your friend Ross?" "Cute," I said, catching his double entendre. Meanwhile, from across the bar, a man called out to me, "Is Ross with you?" It was the older gent Ross had pointed out at the Javelin the previous night, the one with extra cars in his garage. He went on, "That young brute is going to lose a lot of clients if he can't keep his appointments better." I asked the man to explain, and he said that Ross had arranged a meeting that morning, but had never showed up. "He's usually very professional," said the man. "I know," I replied. Edsel interjected, "Domestic problems?" "Not at all," I replied curtly. But I knew something was amiss, so I left the bar and went downstairs to use the public phone in relative privacy. I called Lieutenant Sanfuentes and reported Ross as missing. "Missing? How?" said Sanfuentes. "I don't know where he is." I explained the situation with the older John upstairs in the bar, how Ross hadn't shown up for his appointment. Sanfuentes listened patiently, then asked, "Has your friend ever missed an appointment with you?" "What are you getting at?" "Just answer me," said the cop. "Has he ever not shown up when he said he would?" "Well, yes." "So this is not unusual behavior," said the cop, "right?" "Yes, but we can't consider a person missing just because he misses an appointment in one of the worst hurricanes in history." "But, Lieutenant..." "Stan, you want my advice? Forget about it. You're taking the attentions of a known male prostitute too strongly. You know what I'm saying here?" "I disagree." "That you're right," said the cop. "But I got more urgent matters on my mind, so we'll have to talk about this later." Then he hung up on me. I went back upstairs where Edsel offered me a ride back to my guest house. I said, "I thought you didn't drive." "I don't," he said. "While you were downstairs, the bartender called a cab. When it comes, you're welcome to ride with me." "But I'm staying on the other side of town." He said, "You're on my way." "I'm headed over to the pier house." "The pier house? Near the marina?" "Yes," he said. "I've got some business there." "Now?" "Sure," he said. "You can't let a little rain ruin your life." Nancy L. Drew had expressed a similar notion at the police station earlier. Perhaps it was the standard island trope reserved for stormy weather. Edsel reminded the bartender to put everything on his tab. He was oddly magnanimous that day. Maybe the presence of natural destructive elements had put him in a good mood. The cab that came for us was one of those big pink ones. "Just like yours," I said. He replied, "Mine will be a stretch version." Once inside the cab, I noticed that he was wearing deck shoes, too. I asked him about it, and he said, "They're not just for boats, you know. Excellent traction." Then he advised me to get into some dry clothes. "It would be a shame," he said, "if you caught your death of cold." "I'm hoping for a more dramatic end," I said. "Maybe I'll write one for you," he said with a self-amused chuckle. The cab pulled up to the Jared Bellamy house. By that time, the evacuation traffic had almost disappeared. I suppose it had to stop sometime. Here you are, said Edsel. Time for your bath. Then he looked out the cab window at the place. It looks closed up. Never, I said. I thanked him for the lift, then got out. The cab took off quickly as if I'd launched it on a rampage, with its tires spinning and skidding on the watery road. The only trouble was, the Jared Bellamy house really was locked up. The owners had evacuated. Now what? Here I'd been pedaling around the island in some furious race against time, and for what? To be locked out of my guest house. I mean, what was I doing? Where was I going, and what did I have to go on at the moment? There was the local hustler who didn't keep his appointments. The local singer who seemed to appear everywhere. I was, at any given moment, the piles of local property snatched from their rightful beneficiaries. A corporate lawyer with a custom-made wardrobe, but wearing deck shoes. A commercial hack on the precipice of Hollywood notice, also wearing deck shoes. The torrential rains, the water, the boat shoes, boats, a lawyer, quack, quack, blue water tours. It was a desperate hunch, but what other kind of hunch was there for someone like me? I found a payphone and called Lieutenant Sanfuentes again, but another cop told me he was out of the station on a real emergency. I left a message for him. Urgent, I said, and told him I was going to the waterfront. Then I suspected Ross's body was somewhere down there. The sergeant replied that Lieutenant Sanfuentes had other priorities. I told him I'd already heard that litany. Just tell Sanfuentes where I'm going, I said, as if omitting his rank sounded tougher. By the time you guys believe me, half the island will be massacred. Then I hung up. Meanwhile, the hurricane had grown fierce. The wind battered me with rain that felt like needles. No, nails. Driven through my clothing. I was caught in a travesty of martyrdom as I stumbled my way on foot toward the waterfront. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.